the higher your goal is, the higher your standards have to be to achieve it.
Yep.
I'm going to say that one more time. The higher your goal is, the higher standards you have to achieve it.
If you talk to a physicist, they would have an opinion. But if you're talking to your partner, they also would have an opinion. And why is that? Because everyone has different standards, and everyone's standards usually stay where they're at until they have an outside force impacting where that standard goes. Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast. Today for episode number 133. How are your partner's decisions impacting you? Woof. Going to be a heavy one. Going to be a good one. Before we jump into this episode, I want to say thank you. A huge shout out to Next Level Podcast Solutions for producing this show and so many others, 47 others, which is wild. Spreading personal development, personal growth, mental health, self-improvement, holistic into the world. Thank you for making the world a better place by creating self-improvement content. Very cool. As always, my love, ladies first.
So my intention for this episode is to help our listeners by sharing some of our stories, some of the combined stories that we have from clients, community members, etc., to help them understand the impact of decision-making when it comes to their relationships. And last night, I want to share, I told Alan, I want to share this because I think it would be really helpful to ground this episode. Last night, I was in such an what we call E mode. So I was super emotional last night. And I usually in the past, when I would be in an emotional energy where in my head, what was going on is just like, I'm super grateful for Alan. And I just like, am so grateful for our relationship and how our life, like just in so much gratitude, it like floods me emotionally. And in the past, it's kind of like I described to him last night. It's like a bubble that just wells and wells and wells. And usually, or rather in the past, what I would do is I would just kind of deflate that by myself. And I wouldn't really share or ooze over and share really the joy and the tears and the vulnerability with Alan, because a lot of my past, a lot of people couldn't handle that. And it made people uncomfortable for me to be vulnerable because I'm not always vulnerable. So last night I was in all of the feels and I was right on that verge of having that bubble kind of emotion dissipate. And you were super sweet and you extended yourself over to me and you had said something where essentially it popped my emotional bubble and I just started crying.
I feel like that's been a theme for our whole relationship. Yeah. I feel like I've always done that.
You've always popped the emotional bubble.
With past partners, you probably didn't always share that or you weren't actually that grateful. That's the other piece of this.
Yeah. And they didn't know how to pop that emotional bubble, for lack of a better word. So why do I bring this into this episode? Last night was a huge night of just tremendous gratitude. I mean, Alan and I have so many conversations with so many amazing people around the world. And what we learn in so much of our conversations is how lucky and how grateful we are and how much work we put in to earn each other every single day, to earn the decision-making, the positive choices that we make every single day. And what this podcast episode is really all about is helping every single one of you who's listening to this episode right now understand that better decision-making really equivocates to a better life. And so the joy, the fulfillment, the alignment, the gratitude that I had last night was a culmination of the compound effect of what was at one point poor decision making turned on its head in my relationship and really making better decisions every single day in our relationship. And last night was the emotional spill of the gratitude of really looking at my life and being super appreciative to where we are because of how you and I have been super laser focused on improving our decisions every single day, not only in the me, but also in the we. And so that's why I kind of want to open up this episode, because I think that what we've learned is that relationships don't necessarily focus on making better decisions, and certainly not as consciously as we know they could. And so what if all of the listeners that are listening right now could learn where there is maybe poor decision making in their relationship, how that's impacting their relationship, and what is on the other side if they were to tweak that decision making and get better and better, and what is on the other side for them for that.
So I'm going to open this a little differently than we had talked about. I've done this on stage many times. I've done this at events many times. I always say, everyone think of a terrible decision that you made in high school. I did this on a podcast yesterday, and the host,
Cringe.
Smiled from ear to ear. I said, "You've got one, huh?" And the reason why I use this example is because all of us were idiots in high school. No, but all of us made poor decisions in high school.
Everyone's made a bad one.
And so I said, everyone think of a poor decision you made in high school. I've got one. Emilia's got one. You've got one, if you're listening. Now, I bet you would never do that again. Okay, and the question becomes why? Why would you never do that again? And the answer to that is you are now more aware of the long-term consequences of that bad decision. Whether it went south or not, it could have gone really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The idea of what you say, think, do, feel, and believe, and that the choices you make impact everything in your life and ripple into the future with your partner. And this is the interesting thing about relationships, love. If someone's making poor choices and they're over there and they're not a close association and they're not in your inner circle and you don't spend a lot of time with them, we've all heard that quote of you are the sum average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If they're in your inner circle and they're making bad choices, those choices are going to impact you.
1000%.
So the choices, the number one influence on your future, if you're out there watching or listening to this, is the choices that you are making. The second thing is the choices that your intimate partner are making.
Yep.
Because that's the next person who's closest to you.
Facts.
The third would be your children,
Your family.
and or immediate family, and or friends, colleagues, clients, mentors, mentees, all the way down the line.
Right.
But the biggest 90% of it is you and your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And the choices that you and your partner make now are literally creating the brighter, bigger, better, brighter future, or the future bankruptcy, future divorce, future whatever. It is, okay?
Yeah. Medical
So
problems.
Emilia and I reflected a little bit before this recording and looked at not only our own poor choices, but we also looked at our poor choices in who we were with, our poor choices of who we were friends with, our poor choices of our own bad decisions when it came to alcohol or vices.
Mm-hmm.
And so this episode, whenever I coach people, I've been coaching people for 7 years now. It's been hundreds of people at this point. I'm always looking at, okay, your partner is either green, yellow, or red. I'll never forget this one person I was coaching from Australia, and I actually had a point in the coaching, we had coached for years, where I had to sit her down and say, in my honest opinion, you have these big goals and dreams. From my honest perspective, there's no way you're going to be able to achieve this while being with that person. That person is extremely toxic toward you. They don't want to see you win. They're constantly clawing you down every chance they get. We ended up stopping coaching for a little while after that. And then she came back, and everything I had said was not only accurate, but it was even worse than I had said.
Yeah.
And there was very big evidence of that. And I'm going to keep it all anonymous and high level. But ultimately, here's the deal. Your partner is either green, yellow, or red when it comes to supporting you towards your goals and dreams and your bigger, better, brighter future. Emilia was overflowing with gratitude last night because she knows that she is finally with someone who is super green, who wants to see her succeed, who makes good choices on his own accord. Not always, but
without me poking or influencing or suggesting.
Well, I think that that's a little inaccurate because I think that you have helped me make better choices, and you lead by example, and you have helped me make much better choices, and you do occasionally poke things of like, hey, here's the mirror, you might want to.
Yeah, but on your own accord, the trajectory is super green.
Yeah.
I just make it even greener.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the infinity symbol. So I'm green in my own life, trying to make better choices, and then that goes to Emilia, and then she's trying to make better choices, and then she brings that back to me, and that's the beautiful growth-oriented feedback loop.
Yeah.
So for anyone out there listening who is potentially triggered by this conversation. You might be in a relationship with someone who is making poor decisions, and those decisions are impacting you.
Yeah.
And your future with that person. And you might actually want them to make better choices, even just for themselves. So here we go. Here's the vices: drugs, alcohol, pornography, video games, distractions,
spending,
Instagram, money spending, overconsumption of gambling. Gambling's a big one. Food. Okay, so every human on planet Earth that I've coached, myself included, is imperfect. Every one of us has made poor choices. I've done drugs.
Same.
Okay, same. I used to drink too much and too often.
Same.
Okay. Emilia says the same thing. Okay, so Emilia and I have both quit drinking. I quit like 5 years ago. She quit 4 years ago. And we've been sober for the last 4 years together.
Sober queen.
Sober Sally and sober me. But ultimately, what we have cultivated from that is a bigger, better, brighter future, and we now have the gratitude to finally be with a partner who aspires to be more virtuous and to overcome their vices. And so since I've been with you, I've eliminated almost all vices.
Yeah. Same.
Caffeine, I'm not getting rid of it. Okay, caffeine, need it, love it. But there's very few vices, and all things in moderation. Again, so the goal is not to be perfect.
No.
The goal is to have an honest conversation with yourself, without your partner right now.
Yes.
And say, okay, if I were to be really, really honest, and I were to look objectively at my partner, I know I love them. I know I love them unconditionally. I know I'm imperfect too. But what are their choices that I do honestly believe are not constructive, not positive, not best for our future or for our future family? And if you were to write out that list, it would be 3, 5, 10 things, maybe 50.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not 50.
Yeah.
The question becomes, why have you not had the courage to actually bring some of those things up?
So scary.
And it is so scary. Especially if it's a deep-rooted insecurity where the person has shame around it. And so Emilia and I, over the last 5 years, have helped each other get a lot better.
Yeah.
And the way that we've done that is by having the courage to actually bring certain things up. I remember Emilia asked me one time, what are my top 3 bottlenecks? What do you think are my biggest bottlenecks? And I had a bunch of stuff that I was so scared to share. And she said, Alan, I really want to know.
Like
that's
pulling
why
it out of
yeah,
him.
that's why I'm asking. She might as well have to pull it out of me. And so I don't know what you want to add, but ultimately I think that's a good frame.
Bonnie here. I just wanted to share my experience with group coaching and some of the things that I got out of it. So going into group coaching, I was not tracking any habits at all. And I had sort of jumped on board habit tracking here and there, knowing it was a good idea, but not sort of ever succeeding with it. And so now some of them have become habits. I'm happy to say I wake up, I have a glass of water without even thinking about it anymore. So now I think it's probably time to gear up and increase my water intake or change the water one a little bit, something like that. And so I highly encourage people to jump into group coaching. There's so much information that you will get out of it. I recommend bringing a notebook to all of the sessions and taking lots of notes, asking lots of questions, and rewatching the videos, because it is the video coaching part is just packed with information. I also really recommend that you check in with your accountability buddy and sort of lift each other up throughout the experience, because there's lots of momentum, it's really exciting, and then it gets hard. And so stick with it and carry on, and your life will be better for it. Okay, take care.
Well, I think that's a great place to start. So I think that one of the things when it comes to good and bad decisions, obviously, if we're talking with a statistician, they would have an opinion. If you talk to a psychologist, they would have opinion. If you talk to a physicist, they would have an opinion. But if you're talking to your partner, they also would have an opinion. And why is that? Because everyone has different standards, and everyone's standards usually stay where they're at until they have an outside force impacting where that standard goes. So for example, if my standard prior to meeting Alan or prior to me changing my decision-making, understanding, let's use alcohol for an example, because of being the sober queen that I am. At 25, my standard for my own health was far lower than it is now. And that standard,
By how much?
a significant margin. I can't even quantify that.
If you're a 10 now, what was your standard in hindsight?
Probably a 2.
2.
Probably a 2, right? So that standard was able to be kept because of the company that I kept, right? The decisions that I made, the people that I was with in relationship to, including friends, family, etc. Everyone that is around us encourages us to either continue to make poor decisions by saying nothing, being a complete bystander and just no intervention, or by actively engaging with it with us.
So just to make this more tangible, when you and I first met, you had higher standards in certain things by a significant margin.
Right.
And I had higher standards than you in certain things.
Yep.
One of the things that I had higher standards than you in was no alcohol and health and fitness.
Yep.
And one of the reasons why Emilia's standards have raised so much in sleep, hydration, nutrition, training, mobility, breathwork, and supplementation is because I've rubbed off on her. We all influence each other. And so can you talk from that frame about your partner is rubbing off on you, whether you know it or not, by the way, more than any other human on planet Earth?
Well, that's where I was headed. So it's for me, it was education. Education helped me turn what I thought was a good decision into a wildly bad decision. So what I thought was a good decision of going out and hanging out with friends and family and maybe just having a drink or a bottle of wine or whatever, like I thought that was a good decision because I was maybe living from a lower state of awareness when it came to the actual science of how alcohol impacts my body and decreases my lifespan from an actual scientific standpoint. So when you shared with me, and I remember The Power of a Belief, was it?
The Biology of Belief.
Biology of Belief. That was a book that you shared with me. And I remember that was education that was brought into my world around the science of alcohol and how it impacts our actual telomeres. And I remember after reading that, I was in Otis. I never went back from the way in which I understood how alcohol impacts the body. And then I started researching and learning and all these things. And what I thought was, again, a good decision turned out to be a horribly bad decision for myself because of what the impact would be long term and in the now, right? So that standard of my decision-making paradigm got upgraded, if you will, a software upgrade to a better operating system within how I make choices for myself because of that education. And to the rub-off point that you just mentioned, that book came into my life because of your suggestion, because of your standards.
So how does someone so if you're out there watching or listening to this, you have higher standards in certain things. And by the way, I want to mention this. The higher your goal is, the higher your standards have to be to achieve it.
Yep.
I'm going to say that one more time. The higher your goal is, the higher standards you have to achieve it. I was just on with a financial advisor who has a very high goal for finances, and he tracks his spending every day. He's investing every day. His standards have to be super on point. He studies every day for his Series 7 and his Series, these different tests and certifications. So the higher your goal is, the higher the standards have to be to achieve it.
Exactly.
So if you're out there watching or listening to this, you have a partner who has certain standards that are higher than yours, most likely because they're connected to some conscious or unconscious goal.
Right.
And you have certain goals and standards that are higher than theirs. Here's the question. Who has higher standards where? And then where are their decisions impacting yours and where are your decisions impacting theirs? So my question for you, love, is how does our listener bring this up to a partner if they have basically a partner who's making decisions that are outside of alignment with their standards?
Yeah. Number one, what really comes out of that is the value of better decision making. I think that it's imperative that our listeners understand the 1% improvement rule in terms of how that actually brings better everything into your life. So for example, if you are able to make a 1% improvement in the way in which you consume alcohol, let's just say you go from maybe a bottle a day to a drink a day, that's a 1% better improvement. It's more than 1%. I get it. But again, if that's something that you bring into your day, that's going to massively change the way in which you are able to have less brain fog, you're less hungover, or you feel better, like your gut biome is working better, your cognitive function is better, right? All of those things ripple out into better improvements. And to bring it back to the initial point, if you value that, you will be able to increase those 1% improvements over time. So how does one do that? When they value it, they're going to start to move their decision making around what they value. Again, because of the fact that what you value, your behaviors orient towards.
So would this be a courageous conversation? So how would a listener actually help their partner?
Yep.
How? Yeah.
The second, what I was just going to say is your behaviors, right, is where the communication happens when it comes to bringing something up to your partner. So let's say, for example, your partner values health and fitness more than you.
No.
Or
less.
you value health and fitness more than your partner.
There you go.
How you would bring that up to your partner is from a very courageous and vulnerable standpoint. Knowing that there is a contrast in standards, you might be poking an insecurity, and understanding where your partner is at in their growth and fixed mindset is also really important. So, for example, the verbiage you could use is, hey, honey, I noticed something that I want to bring up to you because I really care about our relationship. And this is really important to me. Do you have a second? Do you have a minute? Do you have 5 minutes to have a vulnerable conversation that I'm kind of afraid to bring up because I love you and I care about you and I love our relationship and I want to see it get better, but I'm concerned that this conversation might rock the boat a little bit.
Yeah.
So first, what are you doing in that? You're getting consent to have a rumble, a tough conversation, potentially, right? And so getting that consent, understanding that your partner kind of gets that buy-in into the conversation, that's really important as a ground rule when you bring up that with a vulnerable approach, which is called a soft approach, as well as having the courage to do that. That sets the ground for that conversation that's going to be had.
The other piece of this too is a friendly reminder for everyone. When you do this, make sure that you say, I still love you unconditionally. This is something that I think would be of benefit for us. And that's a duality, because technically there is a condition, which is if you don't get your shit together in health and fitness.
Yeah, I would disagree
we're
with that.
in trouble. Okay,
Yeah.
so go ahead.
But I think that the intention of what you're saying is very fair.
Right. I still love you as a person.
And I want to continue to love you.
But these behaviors are different.
Right.
And so the behaviors might be a little conditional, but I still love you unconditionally.
Beautiful distinction right there. So what you just separated was the behaviors, the tendencies, the lower standards from the actual person, the identity. So the ego won't feel as attacked in that.
Exactly.
So again, focusing on behaviors, that's an element when you do actually have that conversation. I noticed whenever you are, let's say, really depressed because you had a conversation with your family, like I noticed that the behavior is you start to maybe turn to, you pour a little bit more whiskey, and the impact of that on our relationship is, and I would like to see if we could improve upon that because, and then you insert the negative impact. I'm concerned, coming from a place of concern, I'm concerned that this over time is going to lead to maybe more aggressive language. I'm concerned that
we're setting a bad example for our kids.
Right. We're leaving things around. Your health is going to start to take an impact on this. Like those are the objective facts. Right. And so this is an example and a frame that you can talk about with your partner. Obviously, we're talking about health and fitness because you and I value that so much. We also know that that's a big contention point around a lot of relationships.
Yeah. If you have a core value in conflict, you have health and fitness at level 10 and they have it at 6, it's going to be most likely a point of contention at some point.
Yeah.
Eating, drinking, whatever. Last piece here before we go is, okay, so number 1, identify where you have standards in conflict, where your standards are higher and their standards are higher, and what goals that might be attached to. Number 2, courageous, vulnerable, soft start conversation. And then number 3 is actually support them in working on it.
Yeah.
That's the part that you can't do just with the, quickly. It has to be something that you have to understand your partner is going to have to climb that ladder and you are already ahead. So for example, Emilia and I go to the gym together.
That's a great
and
point.
It's been years and she's come way up and she's done amazing, but I have 9 years on top of you in fitness. Just like if you were and I were to do Muay Thai, you'd have to have some patience with me.
Yep.
Because I'd be new and you'd be the expert and vice versa. So this is where patience comes in. Now, not so much patience to where you completely let it go and neglect the standard, but enough patience to realize that, listen, they're not going to jump 10 rungs on the ladder in 2 days.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. So realistic expectations and asking the question, I believe in your ability to do this and I want to support you. What could support from me that's meaningful really look like on the day-to-day in a practical application? Like that question can be super, super helpful.
And then the very last thing is there might be a time where the partner that you bring this up to says, I don't actually want to change that about myself.
That is so fair.
And that's a whole nother conversation, maybe for another episode. Okay,
Yeah.
So we got to jump. If you have not ever booked a Relationship Talks coaching session, check that out. We coach couples, both individually and collectively with the hybrid model now. The free session will be 30 minutes, and we usually get a little deeper than just 30 minutes. So book on our calendar if you have not yet done that. The difference between couples counseling and Relationship Talks coaching is Relationship Talks coaching helps you work as a team toward that bigger, better, brighter future, and helps you actually be solutions focused in creating these goals and dreams and really working as a team.
Yeah.
How can you grow together, not apart, working as a team, building your dreams together? That is Relationship Talks coaching in a nutshell.
Heck yeah. Be your best self while in the best relationship ever. So also in the show notes, you will also see a link to register to our next Relationship Talks event. This will be number 39. Whoop. September 19th is when it's at. I believe it's 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the topic that we're going to be digging into is how to not hold back your relationship, which I'm super excited for this topic because I feel like it's one of those things that the community has been gnawing for a little bit. Like, how to not
be held back.
How to not be held back. Thank you.
Yeah, how to not hold back your relationship
which actually this topic kind of extends itself a little bit into. So we're going to get into how to not hold back or be held back in your relationship. And I think that we're going to approach it from kind of both sides of that. And a lot of the stuff that no one ever really talks about is going to be addressed and moved forward in that topic. So I'm really excited. Join us there. And we would love to see you there.
As always, thank you again for listening. We appreciate you. It's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is a Lazaros 88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.